So we are back. Doc and Captain coming back because we had so many additional questions flood in after we had filmed the first. We're coming back for a second volume here. So what we did was we took the new submitted questions and we're going to address those today. So I don't know if we're going to post this video at the same time, but either way, we're going to get your answers out there so therefore you can start dominating life. So the first question that we got was from Sam. He had asked a couple of questions. What the first being, heart rate zones different from run and bike, isn't work just work? Well, work is work, but there is a little bit of a change in there when your body is being supported by a bike compared to when your body is going through the impact of running.
And weight bearing, yeah.
So it's going to be different for each individual, but there's going to be a little bit of a difference there because a bike frame is holding whatever our mass is for however long you're going to be on the bike. When you're out there running, your bones, your joints are taking all of that stress over and over and over again. So that's one of the situations that you're going to run into in that particular. And also, it could also have factors in there of how efficient you are in movements and principles in those movements for both of those particular. So that's why it's also not as consistent in that process.
Yeah, and absolutely. If you've been a runner for 50 years, you're an aging runner, and you know what you're doing. Your body knows how to metabolically change to that, to work to that. So you're going to be pretty darn efficient at it, especially if you've done it for a long time. And maybe you were a runner at 5 years old. I mean, same thing. But if you've only been cycling for a year and a half, your body hasn't had that same physical adaptation that you had to the running. So that's another big reason why they're significantly different. So
absolutely. So it's just work is work, but there's different types of work. Next, we have the caffeine. There was a question about 400 milligrams to take during the race and just kind of when from a timing standpoint. Drew, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, caffeine affects every individual very differently. I'd say if you've used caffeine in a race before, I'd say the best time to take it. I mean, and once again, this is more opinion. This isn't really there's not really scientific evidence behind all this stuff, but taking caffeine towards the end of the race when you feel like you're tired, when you feel like you're, you
need a kick in the pants.
Exactly. Your mental acuity is not exactly there. Caffeine has been proven to, sharpen you up and make you race a little bit harder. That being said, there are some significant negative side effects to caffeine. So if you're not used to taking it and you take a whole bunch of it, you can get really shaky. Your heart rate can go out of control. Just a lot of different things. If you have any heart conditions, it's probably a bad idea to do that. The biggest thing is try it. Train. If you feel like you're doing an 18-mile run and the last 5 miles are always tough, well, take a gel with some caffeine in it or whatever your method that you like, and see if that helps. And if it helps, there you go. You got your answer.
Well, and like Drew said, it's very individualized. When I put it into my system, I typically, it goes through me very quickly. So it really is just knowing what your system does on caffeine. And especially with the 400 milligrams, some people are sensitive to that 400 milligrams, but so many people in our society drink a cup or 3 cups of coffee. In the grand scheme of things, that is going to be a very, very small dose of caffeine, and maybe for you, 400 milligrams is going to be a very, very small burst of energy, and it's going to dissipate as quickly as it came on. Another thing with that, Drew, as you said, test in the different environments as well, because if you're out in the heat, it's gonna play a lot differently than if it's cold outside.
Absolutely.
So again, it's about regulating your heart rate, and if you're gonna add something that does increase your heart rate on a hot day, and especially if you're not used to that hot day, it can definitely have a detriment to your overall race and how you wanted to finish.
Yep.
And another question that kind of ties into that was,
increasing RPE. Decreasing RPE, excuse me, Aaron. So you feel like the effort is getting easier, but your heart rate is slowly creeping up. what's the important part, or what should you focus on when the work done feels easier but your heart rate is increasing. So.
And really, in that particular scenario, it's going to be based on your overall race distance in a lot of ways. Again, it's going to play a part of how you take it in, or how your body personally adapts to caffeine. But in this situation, there's a lot of different answers if you're doing a 5K, 10K, half Ironman, full Ironman, or just a half or full distance marathon. So it's really hard to answer that question. On board, all out, if we do not replenish, we could have anywhere from, depending on where our heart rate is, it could be anywhere from 90 minutes of activity to days of activity. And based on that heart rate of where we're at, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where that magic number is, and especially for you and others. It's just one of those situations. One thing that we could do is probably put you on the metabolic analyzer and have you take a bunch of caffeine before and see how that does at particular heart rates, and then we can translate that heart rate into what your race pace is. That might be something that we could give you personally a little bit of a more insight and science-based, individualized answer in that particular case. But outside of that, Drew, what do you think?
I mean, what it really comes down to is if you're racing on strictly based on heart rate, if that's what your plan or your goal is, and we know that at least your body has a very consistent value. So, but it's individualized for you, but you are consistent. So if at 135 beats per minute of your heart rate, you're burning X number of carbohydrates per fat, if your heart rate does increase, then it's going to change that value. So if you are, trying to train at 135, or you're doing a really long race at 135 beats per minute, and it increases due to the caffeine, it could actually throw you into a bad area, if that makes sense. So in that case, RPE is not as important. It's more heart rate driven would be more important. Shorter race, up to you. Doesn't really matter.
Right. So I think the moral of the story is, the one piece of information that we can give across is, if you're getting into that longer distance, half Ironman, full marathons, I wouldn't take it from the shotgun. I wouldn't take it from the get-go. I would add it in maybe halfway or a little bit later across the board, just because if you start that process too early, as Drew pointed out right there, you could be changing the way that you're burning calories, and
which could mess up your nutritional plan.
Exactly. Everything that you've spent time on and implementing into your training could completely be thrown on its side, and at the end of the day, you're going to be asking questions rather than finishing the time that you wanted to.
Absolutely.
So that leads us to our next question, which was overtraining and over-racing impacts. So for this, there's a lot of documentation on what, and I'm just going to lump them both of them together, but it's really, by overtraining, we are adjusting our hormones, which can be a serious, serious problem for both male and female. So I want to start with the females. If you are training to a point where you are just adjusting your menstrual cycle, that is a problem. And I would definitely communicate with your doctor to have that conversation, to make sure that there are some adjustments being made and that is being monitored. As far as males, you are also going to run into situations where you're adjusting testosterone and other aspects of your hormones, and that can affect sleep, that can break down the body and cause injuries. Other things are, brain just went blank there, Drew.
That's okay. What we would recommend, if you're getting your blood tested, so if you're going to flirt with really, 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 really high training weeks, it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually have blood count tested, and we actually have a partnership with Athlete Blood Test, and that's a good way to kind of monitor it. But that's only if you're flirting with this area. But if you notice that you're extra fatigued, your motivation goes way down, you really just don't want to do something, or everything seems hard, you might be flirting with that overtraining or over racing in that case. Another thing that we want to bring up here is, We talk about heart rate variability. I think we've talked about it almost every single video. It's
you
weird.
Stole my. No.
I'm sorry. So that is a great way to monitor if you are truly overtraining. All of our Garmin watches will say, "Oh, you're right in the sweet spot of where you should be training. You're undertraining. You're non-productive," and those are kind of okay accuracy-wise, but it's not spectacular. But the HRV will give you a lot more, cold hard scientific data, which will kind of help you notice that. And like I said, you're flirting with the high end of training stuff, athlete blood test, and for males monitoring testosterone level and all the other lovely things that they break down for you for endurance athletes. Same thing for females. Would be a good addition.
And one thing that you touched on, Drew, was the enjoyment, and a lot of what we're doing this for is some form of enjoyment. And if by overtraining, you're going to have that decreased in that you're probably, like we said, you're going to have some issues sleeping. Life is going to get a heck of a lot more difficult. And if you just continue to put your foot on the gas, the likelihood and that those challenges are just going to continue to creep up and actually explode on you rather than just magically get. Got a little bit of technical difficulty and the filming stopped right there. So we're going to try to pin this together and get it back in. But if you're having that decrease of fun, decrease of motivation, and just really not looking forward to the process, this is somewhere in that overtraining possibility. And taking a step back, it can take 3, it can take 5, it can take 10 days to really get you back in. But yeah, it's so very important with all the things that we have at our fingertips now is utilizing that HRV. And I stand by it. Like Drew said, you've heard a number of times us bringing it up, and we probably are going to continue to bring this up just because it does have an inside look of how you're recovering, what kind of stress you're putting on your body, and how your heart and body is adapting to that training. Yeah. And if you start to see a downward slide on that, it's a quick indicator of something's got to change, rather than, you know what, I feel tired, but I'm just going to hammer right through this next workout. You do that 4 or 5 days in a row. Next thing you look back and, boy, I've done a heck of a lot of work, and you might be grumpy, and the people around you might not want to spend time with you. That's not something that we do this for. So overtraining can be a very, very serious indicator, or just the feelings around it can be a very serious indicator that you're testing that or flirting with that line. But again, overall, this is still something that is very individualized, and Drew's amount of time is going to differ from my amount of time. Yeah. And also that lead-in that we are leading up to whatever point we're at in our training cycle is also going to have a big part in whether you're overtraining. So it's not about just looking at, well, I've had 17 hours of training this week. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's overtraining. It's more of the physical components that are going to play in part of that, and the way that you're going to feel and the efforts that you're able to put out that's going to really be the indicator of that. It's not going to be a total time mark. So just keep that in the back of your minds as well. Yeah.
All right, last question. We talked about pre and post training stretching and what a warm-up routine should look like. So before you do any hard workout, a good thing that you can do is what we call a dynamic warm-up. And whether that is just moving through your muscles, a fast walk, a really slow jog before a run, something to just kind of get you moving, swinging your legs around, getting a quick, easy stretch to everything, and same thing for a swim, swinging your arms around.
We've all seen Michael Phelps. This would be that's a dynamic stretch. When he's leaning over the pool and flying his hands, that is a dynamic stretch. That's probably something that a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah, sometimes swimming, people use stretch cords to pull back and forth, kind of warm up their arms. All that stuff is good. What you really want to avoid, especially before competition, before a very hard effort, is the static hold of stretching, holding for a long period of time. That actually in research has shown to decrease your power output. So if you stretch really hard and you go right into a workout and you wonder why you feel tired, that's probably what you're sensing. So Pre-dynamic warm-up, quick stretch, easy movement, move around, get your body, blood flowing, and then go into your workout. Post-activity, this is when the static stretching is great. If we talked about this in another video, if I feel tight one day, I'll sit in front of the TV and I'll stretch my hamstrings for 20 minutes. Whatever feels good for you. If it feels good, do it. If you feel like you need that increased flexibility, add it to what you're doing. But it's not 100% necessary for everybody.
And one of the things I would add with that is that also, again, research has shown doing long static stretching after an activity, you probably want to let the muscles cool down a little bit before that. So Drew's right on about hold it as long as but in that particular case, I would separate that from the end of your activity by a good hour or a couple hours, just to allow everything to kind of settle down and the muscle fibers come back to their normal kind of elasticity. Because if you go in at that higher elasticity or when they're already warm, you might push a little bit too far or hold a little bit too long, opening yourself up to potential injury, which would be a bad thing in that particular case. So it's something where it just shows that if you warm the muscle up and then do a static stretch, it does have that, the risk of injury does slightly go up on that particular case. So just separate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But dynamic is the way to go. I think a lot of us just hop on a bike, starts pedaling at a high RPM, get it rolling. Also, just kind of going out, maybe taking that first mile on the run, nice and easy, and then picking up your work. These are great ways, because those are legitimately the muscles that you're going to use because you're using them in the warm-up part of it. So it's a good starting place to be at. So those are all things that you can do to get that pre and post training stretch. I think there was one other thing about some of the different ways to recover after a race. I know that we've had some videos about this in the past. You'll hear me as a big advocate of food. It's a lot about what you put in, and the less processed foods that you're going to put in, the less work that the body has to do and is able to break those nutrients down to get them to the recovery, or to get them to the body that is there to try to recover in that particular case. I know we've had a few of these videos talking about Normatec boots, Theraguns, things of that nature. These are all valuable tools that can be utilized, but the number one thing is going to be just low processed foods and movement.
Yeah, obviously electrolytes, water, all that other fun stuff. But really post recovery, recovery after a race is just move yourself around. I told Aaron, and I mentioned this the other day, swimming. It sounds crazy. No one wants to swim. Maybe Aaron does. But just actually getting in and swimming after a race. Sometimes I'll swim, then I'll go sit in the hot tub for a little bit, and then I stretch out a little bit afterwards, and that typically kind of alleviates all that delayed onset muscle soreness. So.
Absolutely. So hopefully second take, we were able to come back and answer all the questions. Maybe we might get a couple more rolling in, but we will probably address those in the chat. But we appreciate everybody's interaction into this process. We want to continue to make sure that you know that this video series is for you guys. We want to continue to develop that knowledge and make you more efficient. So outside of that, Drew, you have anything to add?
Nope.
All right. Well, go out there and make some magic.
Have a good day.